Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Recommend you stream us from Spotify for now. Apple Podcasts been a little bit slow of late. Also, check out Prize Picks. Use the code 5 FIVE. Put down your $50. Put down your $5. You get $50 to play right away. Prize Picks, the official fantasy sponsor of the Five Reasons Sports Network. Also, throughout the NBA Finals, we're running a contest. Greg, Alex, Brady, and myself all get $20 to play in every game. You pick your fighter. If you're signed up using the code 5 FIVE, and we pick you randomly from the others who chose the same person who won, then we're going to give you an additional 20 in Prize Picks promo fund. So check it out. Use the code FIVE at prizepicks.com. Also check out Off the Floor. That's our Discord server, $2.99 per month. Link right there in the description. You get the draft channel, the transaction channel. You also get the stage shows and more. You got to pay the $2.99 though. Otherwise, you don't get anything but an announcement page. So click on the link, go there, pay the $2.99. You can cancel at any time. And now, today's episode.
Mercy, luxurious, Heat Nation, yeah, Mercy and Lago, down to Biscayne, yay, five on the floor, ride for my dogs, where here's the thing, you can check the score, hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs, down to Biscayne. Kept the flow playing, got it all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the Five Reasons Sports Network. Also make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan of Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick at 5 Reasons Sports. I got Greg Sylvander. You can follow him at Greg Sylvander. So these rankings come out from time to time, and they provide us with content during times that we don't have a lot of content. We have given you content lately. We're all across the spectrum doing draft shows with Adele. We're talking about the NBA Finals. And of course, we're talking about the Miami Heat offseason. So we're going to blend a couple of things together in this episode. We're going to look at the Ringer rankings. And again, this is not definitive in any way. These rankings are extraordinarily subjective. I'll just put it here. For those who follow the Ringer, of course, they do a lot of NBA. But they have Joel Embiid. And again, you and I are both not the biggest Joel Embiid fans, but they have Joel Embiid at 84 right now. This is a former MVP. Now, of course, he's injured. He's been injured. But again, I mean, I'm looking at Joel Embiid, and he is right behind Christian Braun, who they classify, of course, Denver Nuggets guard who's looking to get paid. Hustle junkie with a burgeoning all-around game. Yes, he's a good player. He's not Joel Embiid. So, again, we want to be clear on this, that we're not taking any of this as gospel, but it does provide a takeoff point because, Greg, the Miami Heat do not have a superstar right now. We know this. They had one who was borderline and Jimmy Butler. And by the way, he's ranked 24th here. So they don't have him in the top 15 or 20 either. And I don't believe that Jimmy Butler is a superstar at this stage. I think he proved himself to be a playoff superstar during a couple of those postseasons with the Miami Heat. But I don't think you can classify him as a superstar. The only superstar on that team is Steph Curry. And again, with his age, we don't know how much longer that's going to be the case. But this does sort of make a point as we go forward here. So tell me where the Heat's top two players rank in the Ringer rankings.
So they've both fallen in the rankings, I believe, if I remember correctly, from prior years. I know Bam has fallen, and he ended up at 32 in these rankings. So the 32nd best player in the NBA. Directly in front of Trae Young, directly behind Domas Sabonis in Sacramento. And then you got Tyler Herro, which I'm having to scroll a lot further down these rankings to get to. Surprisingly, coming off what I think it's a pretty much good consensus was his best season of his career. He's all the way down at 51. And they actually have at the top of the rankings here. And again, this is not gospel, but they have kind of the trending down arrow, which again is tough for me to understand.
Yeah.
I guess the part of it that we're going to have to talk about is Tyler's playoff performance. And, like, as teams really load up on trying to stop him, how does he react to that? How does he still be as effective and efficient as he was at his best when those kind of things are at play? But yeah, so you got two guys on the Heat, Ethan, that are the quote unquote, I want to use this term loosely, like the pillars of whatever is being built in Miami right now. And neither of them are top 30 players in this kind of ranking system. Again, to your point about it not being the gospel, I think that it's important that we make the distinction that this gives us a general idea of maybe where they are ranked if we were to pull consensus rankings. So that's where I think it becomes informative, because Ethan, when we've looked at these in prior years, because we tend to look at this annually, Jimmy's been in the top 20.
Yeah.
Bam's even crept into the top 25, where the Heat had two guys, I think coming off the finals run or so, they had two guys in the top 25. Now they have no one in the top 30 and only two guys in the top 50. What does that mean for everything? I don't know, but it is interesting to see where those guys rank after this last season, particularly Tyler.
Yeah, so let's look at Tyler a little more specifically. Let's look at some of the players that are above him, because the trending down with Tyler is silly, I think. I don't know how you can argue he's trending down after the season that he just had. You can argue about whether or not he'll continue to trend up, but I don't think you can argue he's trended down. So, okay, let's go from 41 on. Amen Thompson, who's an elite defender. Tyler also cooked him in Houston this year. I don't think he's anywhere near tapping his offensive potential. He's 22 years old. Of course, he was a top 5 pick a couple of years ago. But again, 41, healthy, 11 spots ahead of Tyler. Aaron Gordon, who I do think is one of the most underrated players in the league, has made great strides as an offensive player. Is a terrific defensive player. Perfect role for him being the number 3 in Denver. He kind of had to be the number 2 in Denver a lot this year with Murray's inconsistency. Got hurt in the playoffs. Played through it, which I give him great credit for. I'm not sure it was smart. But again, I think, most people, again, the argument I make is, would you trade Tyler Herro for this particular player? I think most Heat fans probably would for Aaron Gordon. They might for Amen Thompson's future.
Yes.
Okay. Sure. Right. But I don't know about right now. Okay. And then you have Dame Lillard at 43, which is a tough one no matter how you look at it, because Dame, when he's healthy, is, I think, still a top 30 guy, but he's not going to be healthy all next year. So it's almost like you just take him off the list. But he's at 43. Kyrie Irving, 44, also coming off a big injury, which is what drops him. If healthy, would you still take him over Tyler? Yes. But he is an aging player who's relied on quickness, also on great skill. The skill's not going anywhere, but again, some injury history of late. We'll see how he comes back from the latest one. Zion Williamson at 45 is a tough one, because I don't know. Because when Zion's right, he can be a top 15 player in the league. He's never right. He's never right. He's never healthy. He's never passed the off the court stuff. They're trying to move forward with him. It seems, I can kind of see through it. It seems like they're trying to prop him up. They sent him to the lottery, but it looks like they want to build around others. Would you trade Tyler for Zion? I guess you better have him followed around Miami. So I mean, I guess that's right. I mean, but Zion to me is a concept at this point. He's not even a player. He's a concept. Yeah. They haven't won a player. I mean, he hasn't accomplished anything in the postseason in his entire career. He's the number 1 overall pick. He's not a bust, but he's certainly not what they expected him to be. Okay, so then Scotty Barnes at 46. I mean, I think you would trade Tyler Herro for Scotty Barnes.
Because of archetype. But I just want to remind everyone, as we use these ringer rankings, there was a day where I believe Bill Simmons was going around touting Scotty Barnes as maybe the most valuable trade asset in the league. Yes. And he is no longer that. And just also, since Boston comes to mind, they got Jason Tatum, and I'm backing way, way up, but I just have to say this. They've got him way too low. They've got him 10th, and he's won a championship. You can't have Donovan Mitchell and Jalen Brunson in front of him. So again, these rankings are very much subjective.
And this is a Boston outlet also, which tells you. But again, the injury stuff is what makes this really complicated.
They're looking
so
ahead.
You're projecting.
You're right.
Right. So 47, Desmond Bane, they have him on the way down. I mean, I like Desmond Bane a lot as a player. I don't think he had a great season. He's very well paid. Would most Heat fans trade Tyler for Desmond Bane? I don't know. To me, it's kind of a wash. It depends on what kind of player you're looking for,
That's
right?
a dopamine hit from your Shams bomb. Like, that's what you're getting. It's
That's
not
pretty
that big
much
of a
it.
difference.
Jalen Johnson, who is on the way up, I really liked what I saw of him this year, but he did get hurt also. We'll see how he recovers into next season. Doesn't look like that's going to be a long-term thing. I think he's Atlanta's best player going forward, but I'm not a big Trey guy. But I know others are. Again, I understand Alex. He's an elite passer. I understand all of that. He's got great range. He's also not, to me, a guy you win with consistently. But I'm more of a Jalen Johnson fan than I am a Trae Young. LaMelo Ball at 49. I'm not a fan of LaMelo Ball at all. I know you live in one of the Carolinas. He didn't make the All-Star team. I didn't think he should have made the All-Star team. He's fun to watch. He does not contribute to winning in any way.
No,
right.
He doesn't get it. Like, I'll just straight
Right.
up say that. Like, and people can come after me if they like. I think he's ranked appropriately for how he impacts winning.
Okay, 50 Draymond Green, and this is a tough one. I can't argue. Let's put the podcast stuff and the other extracurriculars aside. I can't argue with his continuing defensive impact. He is still an elite defensive player when he's at the top of his game. He's also so limited offensively at this stage, with the exception of his facilitating. So you talk about shooting, finishing, and all those other things. That, like, if he's not stapled to Steph's hip, and now Jimmy's hip, I don't really know what he is at this point. But I'm not, because of the pedigree, I get it, okay, to put him in the top 50. And then 51 is Tyler. Okay, I said 52 before. And he's ahead of Julius Randle, by the way. He's ahead of Lauri Markkanen. He's ahead of Austin Reeves. He's ahead of Rudy Gobert. And then a player that I know we both like, Trey Murphy III. So he's ahead of some players who get a lot of attention. So and Tyler is higher here than he's been in other years. I know ESPN has had him in the 70s, so he's come up a little bit. But what I want to talk to on the other side of this is, I don't think we can argue that they have a cornerstone. And I know we don't need the Ringer to tell us this, but when we're saying with Tyler, okay, somewhere in the 50s, low 40s is about right, which basically puts him as a number 2. Like, that's a number 2. That's like a low end number 2. And essentially they have Bam as like a high end number 2. And there ain't no real number 3. I don't see Wiggins on this list anywhere. And so that tells you kind of what they have. And I as we go to the other side of this, I want to talk about, in particular, the Toronto Raptors, something that somebody on our Off the Floor Discord brought to my attention, and I think it's worth looking at. All right, so before we do, though, you know what's worth looking at if you're looking to buy a house? Real Estate Shop. Find it at realestateshopfl.com. That's Real Estate Shop with 2 P's in the FL.com, or the Fort Lauderdale Realtor. Amanda, Javier, they do a great job for you. They have the open houses all over Broward County. You can find them in Pine, Sunrise, Fort Lauderdale. They're everywhere. Again, follow all that at the Fort Lauderdale Realtor and their other IG accounts. But they will work with you to get the best deal for your house if you're selling, or the best deal for you if you are buying a house. Just really good people, family people. If you have a family and you're trying to figure out what's the best house for you, they can relate to you on that level. And they're honest, they're trustworthy. And again, huge Miami Heat fans. We've had Javier here on 5 on the Floor. So check them out. Real Estate Shop. That's realestateshopfl.com, or the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram. All right, so I don't think, Greg, we needed the Ringer to tell us this, but let's look at Bam and who's ahead of him, because I think, again, this is instructive when we talk about, like, what kind of players are perceived to be anchor type players. So he's at 31. Okay,
32.
30. Oh no, sorry. No, I have him here 31. Hold on a second. Let me see. Oh wait, no, hold on. You're right. Oh, that's the trade value thing. They have the trade value rankings as well. So I skipped ahead a little bit. All right, so we'll go to Bam on this one. There we go. I'm sorry. Yeah, they have about the same place in the trade value rankings. All right, so here are some of those that are above, and I'm going to sprint through this list, so we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on it as I go to the top here. Let's actually go from 21 on. All right, Jaylen Brown, reigning Finals MVP, at least prior to this one, who had a good season with Boston. We never really got to see the turn up in the playoffs because of what happened to them overall. Paolo at 22, Siakam at 23. I think Pascal is one of the most underrated players in the league. Jimmy at 24. Jaren Jackson Jr. at 25. He is not a riser in big games at all. De'Aaron, and that applies to international competition or the playoffs. De'Aaron Fox, 26, weird season for him. Obviously, an elite skill guy. Didn't we'll see what he does in San Antonio. Again, different fit for him. But there was a lot of issues in Sacramento this year. Chet Holmgren at 27, who I like, but I feel like we've gotten ahead of ourselves a little bit with him. Darius Garland at 28. I think that's high. Very easy to attack defensively, as we even found in the Heat were better when Garland played against Cleveland, and they're looking to move him. Jamal Murray, 29. They have him on the rise up. I don't. Jamal Murray to me had a very inconsistent season for a star. James Harden, 30. I'll admit, James had a good year this year, still couldn't rise in playoffs. And Domas Sabonis, as you mentioned, 31. This is the one Heat fans will object to. Right ahead of Bam, and then Bam ahead of Trey, John Morant, Zubac, who had a terrific year. I think he should be ahead of Sabonis after his past year. Sengun, Franz Wagner, Derek White, the all-time role player at this point. Tyrese Maxey and OG Anunoby. I guess when you look at some of these players, most of these guys are number twos. That's why they're in this space. Now, you have a guy like Maxey who's kind of been forced to be a number one because of Embiid's injuries.
Or
but
Trey.
The majority, or Trey, right. But the majority of these guys are number twos. The problem is not Bam as a number two or even Bam making that kind of money, anchoring the Heat defense, which falls apart without him. The problem is they don't have anybody in front. Because the majority of these guys, you can kind of give them the ball and get out of the way. And not all of them, okay? Again, Derek White's a role player. We're talking about him in the late 30s. But even Ja at 34, Trey at 33, Sabonis is a better offensive player than Bam. He's nowhere near where Bam is defensively. Harden at 30, my feelings, but, Murray at 29, Garland at 28, Holmgren, not a get-out-of-the-way player yet, but he's still progressing. De'Aaron Fox, again, probably going to be a co-number one option in San Antonio unless they get a guy like Durant or Giannis, in which case he'll be a number three. Jaren Jackson Jr., not that kind of player. Jimmy, obviously, we've had a lot of conversations about Pascal Siakam. Pascal Siakam is the top scorer on Indiana. He's a better scorer than Bam, right?
He's underrated on this list. And if Siakam, he's got one championship. They just closed game one. We're on the eve of game two, or tonight's game two as we record this. I mean, if Siakam were to somehow win two championships, even the biggest Bam Adebayo supporter, such as myself, would have to say, hey, if Bam had two rings, there's no way I'd be allowing Siakam to be put ahead of him. So I understand where now I feel like Siakam is creating separation, not just from Bam Adebayo and Domas Sabonis, but at this point, even players like Karl Anthony Towns, who they have, I think, ranked ahead of him. And even, frankly, Paolo Banchero, who I know eventually may end up being the face of Team USA from a scoring perspective, and Orlando's an up-and-coming team. Siakam right now, I think, is capitalizing in a big way, and it kind of shows that Indy took a risk, and it's paying off at this moment.
Okay, and I'm glad we're talking about Siakam because it transitions us to the last part of this pod. Because you say Indy took a risk. They traded 3 first-round picks for Toronto, but there had to be a seller on the other side. And I want to go through where the former Toronto players, with the exception of Kawhi, because Kawhi was not their choice to leave, but the former Toronto players from recent years are ranked on this list. Because Masai Ujiri made a decision that those players, many of whom are on this list, were not good enough to continue to win with, and ultimately made a decision to break that team up. And he's now in a rebuild phase that may go very quickly because they're players for Giannis and others with and Durant with some of the young guys that they've accumulated over this period of time. And I think it's instructive for the Heat for this reason. Because if we're saying Tyler and Bam are about the same kind of players that Masai decided were not good enough to lead his franchise anywhere. And so he decided to move those players. And I'm talking about specifically, Van Vliet, I guess I forgot exactly how he got to use. He was free agent, right? But he made a decision not to move on, not to resign him. But Van Vliet, Siakam, Anunoby, right? Those are the three primary. I mean, Lowry.
And Kyle Lowry.
Yeah, exactly. But we know with Kyle, and again, they got Precious, who is not still there, and Dragic and all the rest. But those three guys in particular, Van Vliet on this list. I'm curious. We said Siakam is 23, right? Okay,
I'm
Van
looking
Vliet.
now. Yeah, he's 64.
Okay, so Van Vliet is 64, a little bit below Tyler. And again, this list is not the be all end all. Okay, but and Anunoby is, where is he? 40. So 23, 40, and you said 63. So they got three former Raptors in the top of this top 63 of this list. The Heat have two, roughly the same spots. I mean, Bam is between Siakam and Anunoby, and Tyler is between Anunoby and Van Vliet. Toronto decided wasn't good enough. They put everybody on the table, including Siakam, who is ranked higher on this list than Bam. And I know you guys just did 45 minutes on the Bam episode. I'm through about 33 of it. Promise I will get to the end of it. Told Alex, just do a short episode. So we know what that means. I'm throwing this to you now because I think there are some Heat fans, and this has come up on Off the Floor, that would say, all right, like it hasn't paid off for Ujiri yet. We don't know what he's going to cash in with these guys. But he's accumulated a pretty nice young roster, has additional picks coming from the Siakam trade. And they are now a player. We'll see, because he doesn't always close these deals. But they're now a player for Durant. They're now a player, potentially. Some of it is relationship-based with Masai and Giannis, because it goes way back. But they're a player for him. While the Heat, all we hear about is they'll never trade Bam. I mean, Toronto traded Siakam. Like, Siakam was a project for them. Like, Siakam played in the G League. Okay. Like, they
And Masai was
groomed
close
Pascal.
with Siakam. That was like just as close as Bam is with the Heat organization. There was ties there,
Right.
you know?
Right. So we've talked a lot about this idea of trading Sabonis, which Indiana did, to get Halliburton, or some of the, or again, Paul George was kind of forced, but OKC trading Paul George to get SGA, and this decision to go with a younger guy if you have to trade somebody and replenish. But we haven't really talked about a team that actually is in closer proximity to where Miami was and seems further along in its process, because they made a couple of really hard decisions. Van Vliet was a huge favorite in Toronto.
I think, to be fair, we have to see if they're actually that much closer, because I think like Toronto is still losers and they're not winning much. And so, yeah, like if they close the deal on Giannis going, leaving the States and heading to Canada, or if something happens with Durant or something like that, obviously all that remains to be seen. But I don't necessarily know that we can look at them and say that they're further along, other than, and I think this is fair to say, they got more to offer in trades than Miami does. There's no question about that. Especially if you're keeping Bam Adebayo off the table as Miami. So this is, and it's something I touched on with Alex, and I'll mention it here. And it kind of wraps a bow on all of this. Toronto did the thing that, like I said, I don't want to do if we were to talk about trading Bam. And that's like, if I'm trading Bam, I want like a blue chip asset back. And I feel like Toronto made a lot of moves, and they didn't get one asset that everybody says, whoa, but they stockpiled. And so it is a way of going about this. It's just a matter of, are they going to actually build something that is fortified and as good as what they had before? We'll see. They've invested in Brandon Ingram. Like, there's guys that they've invested in that now they're going to have to figure out if they're good enough. So it's not that Toronto perfected this, but they went the other direction than I think where everyone thinks Miami was going to go. And that's, they got their eyes on the 14th guy on this list, Kevin Durant. And like, that's like, I think where Heat fans are looking, whereas Toronto did the complete opposite and stockpiled assets. And now we'll see, they could outbid Miami for Kevin Durant.
They get outbid, and Durant may even be interested in going there, even though Miami has no state tax. Miami is considered to be a more attractive destination than Toronto, which, by the way, one of my 5 favorite cities. So I never trash Toronto as a city, but we know it's not typically an attractive city for a lot of free agents or trade prospects. But it's not the first time that Masai's made a really difficult decision. DeMar DeRozan was the leading scorer in Raptors history, wasn't he? I mean, ahead of Bosh, ahead of Vince, I believe, or right there with Vince. And he traded DeMar DeRozan to get Kawhi. Now, looking back at it, we're like, okay, that's an easy decision. But remember, Kawhi was like AWOL from the Spurs. Like, you couldn't even find him. And basically, Masai decided, okay, we can't go with a guy like DeRozan who has been a playoff dropper throughout his career. Unfortunately, I like DeMar, but that's just the nature of it. And let's go get a playoff riser in Kawhi and let's get him healthy and maximize him for one season. If he leaves, he leaves. But let's see how this goes. These are really hard decisions. And this is kind of what I got into with Sean on the pod about the Knicks. I'm not saying I want the Heat to be the Knicks, okay? Going through 16 coaches since Riley left and everything else that's transpired, okay, giving up 5 first-round picks for a B-plus player in Mikal Bridges. That's not what – but I like them to have a little bit of the Knicks. Like 20% of the Knicks, a little bit more aggressiveness and take a chance. We could say they did with Rozier, but that we'll do a trade pod on the 5 worst trades in Heat history. That's going to land somewhere in there. So I get it that that didn't work out. We push for that, but I'm just saying, like, you look at teams that have made like these tough decisions, and typically it's paid off, or at least they've gotten out of this middle stage. Maybe it's backfired, and then they've had to kind of rebuild. But I'm with you on what you're saying about Toronto. But before we close here, I just want to go through this story here. This was in SB Nation, okay? But just first what I can find. The Toronto Raptors finally did it after years of speculation about how and when the Raptors would blow up their middling roster. Middling roster, it's the word we use for the Heat. Toronto finalized its decision to embrace a rebuild by trading its only remaining link to the 19 NBA championship team, one of its best players in franchise history. The Raptors traded Pascal Siakam to the Pacers on Wednesday. In return, Toronto received Bruce Brown, Jordan Nwora, 2 first-round picks. Can we go and look real quick who they took? I'm curious. I'll try to look for it as well. And a Pacers 26 first-round pick, protected inside the top 4. So that will divest next season. The Raptors are receiving the Pacers' own 24 pick, as well as the least favorable of the Jazz, Clippers, Raptors, Rockets, Thunder pick due to a complicated swap from previous trade. Herro Lewis will also go to the Raptors. The Raptors had already traded longtime stalwart OG Anunoby to the Knicks 3 weeks earlier, and by dealing Siakam, Toronto is fully committing to a youth movement built around 22-year-old forward Scotty Barnes. Are we able to find who they took? I'm going to take a look at the 2024 draft.
In 2024, right? They had the 19th pick. They took Jacoby Walter. I'm looking for where they took other players, but in the first round, there isn't a ton there. So I don't know if maybe their picks were flipped or something like that. But that's the only 2024 first round pick that I'm seeing the Raptors. They did draft Jonathan Mogbo, I think is how you say it, with the first pick of the second round. So maybe there was some gymnastics done via trade there, but that's what I'm finding.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing there too. Okay, and Jacoby Walter, he's played thus far 52 games in the NBA. Mogbo's played 63 games. I think Grady Dick was their own pick. Is that right? That was this.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe he was their own pick. But they have an interesting young group. Now, will they cash in with a huge signing or acquisition and a trade? We don't know, but it's just something to think about here. And as we go forward, and we're saying, okay, are you trying to build with Bam and Tyler and try to get somebody who's maybe better than both of them? But how do you do that without trading one of the two of them? And Toronto made the decision. Our fans, this team won a championship. Tyler and Bam haven't won a title. Reached the finals twice. I know Tyler had more to do with it the first time than the second time because of the injury. Bam had a lot to do with it both times. Reached the finals twice. Didn't win a championship, though. Van Vliet, they let walk in free agency to Houston. Big contract. I think it was $40 million. I don't think he's worth that. Okay, but they let him walk. Huge fan favorite. Siakam was arguably the second best player on that championship team. Second or third, somewhere in there.
Yep.
And Adebayo was a rising player who was hurt during a lot of that run, or has been hurt during some runs. But obviously you saw the potential from him and what he could be. Those are tough decisions. And that's why I say, Greg, I'm not advocating for trading Bam. I'm not even advocating for trading Tyler. unless you absolutely know you can't come to an extension agreement with him that's palatable going forward. But I'm also saying ain't nothing should be off the table. Nothing.
That's true.
Because otherwise you're stuck in this place, and it's not, and I don't think this is someplace they want to be long term. All right, I said 20 minutes. We went 30. Anyway, thanks to our sponsors, Prize Picks. Use the code 5 FIVE, and also Real Estate Shop FL.com.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.